We are going live with Sheila Gregoire, the author of The Great Sex Rescue, because there have been lies told to us, ladies, lies, not necessarily by liars, because sometimes we've told them to ourselves and to our daughters and to our sons and our men about sexuality and about how to stay pure, and how there's an influence now in purity culture that we want to be pure before God because we're washed in the blood, because of that. But we struggle with this whole idea of sex and temptation, and being the temptation. No. Look, these questions get answered by Sheila in her book, and I've got her right here. See, she's right there. I've got her. If you would like to make a comment, join the conversation, that's great. Please like and subscribe as well, and we will get underway. Sheila Wray Gregoire, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're going to have fun. We're going to get real.
Yeah. Oh, we're going to get really real, and I'm going to blush, but I'm going to push through. I'm not a prude, but maybe a little. So
that's okay.
The show is called Prison to Promise, Free Indeed. And ladies and gents, it is time that we were free indeed in the bedroom, in the right context, but free to understand this stuff that we try, that just, there's so many opinions and controls on it that are not free and not from Holy Spirit, but they're our way of trying to battle that age-old question of that which I do, I don't want to do, and and that men are like this and women are like this, and then there's that whole submission thing that gets kicked into, so that immature men can get their way, and then call it godly. I'm going to stop now and ask Sheila how she came to be in this world of sex talk in the church.
Yeah, because that's a weird thing. Nobody grows up saying, hey, I want to be the Christian sex lady, because that's just odd. And I certainly didn't. I started off as a mommy blogger in 2008. I was blogging about housework and parenting and organization. And I found the more I talked about sex, the more my traffic grew. And so my blog kind of morphed into the sex place to lovehonorandvacuum.com. And then in 2012, my first sex book was out, The Good Girl's Guide to Great Sex. I've since rewritten it, and the new version's out next month.
Right.
And then I did courses. I did an orgasm course, a libido course. I'm writing all these blog posts about how to make sex great. But there was one thing I never did. And that was I never read the evangelical marriage and sex book, because I was always afraid of plagiarizing. So I figured, they love Jesus, I love Jesus, we're all saying the same thing. And then one day, it was January 2019, I had a migraine, I didn't want to work, I was on Twitter. People were arguing about whether or not they needed love or respect, and they were referring to the book Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. I don't know if that's big in Australia, but
now hold on. Wait, do they need love or respect?
That's right, because the thesis of the book, which is huge in North America, it's the largest or is the biggest used marriage study in North American churches, is that men need respect while women need love.
So men don't need love,
and right?
Women don't need to be respected.
Yeah, I mean, he argues they need both, but what women really need is love, and what men really need is respect. And it's a very problematic book, but I didn't know that, and so I went and got it. And I read the sex chapter, and I swear it was like a nuclear bomb went off in my living room, because I'm reading this thing and it says, if your husband is typical, he has a need you don't have. So guys need sex and women don't.
Well, hang on. Women don't need it.
That's right. Yes. And he explains that a man needs physical release while a woman needs emotional release.
Release.
Yes, he actually says release. That's how he describes sex, is a man's physical release. So sex is about, not to get crude, but sex is about a husband's ejaculation. That's the purpose.
Well, what do they need marriage for?
I know, exactly.
They can just do that anytime.
And he tells women they need to minister to their husband sexually as unto Jesus Christ.
Hold on. Sorry, I just have to get rid of a visual. Sorry, keep going. Sorry, yes. Keep going.
and that you should be happy because it makes him so happy and it takes so little time. And
Maybe for some.
and that if you don't have sex, he'll probably have an affair, or he might have an affair because affairs are caused by women not having sex. And you need to understand his problems with lust. And that's like the entire chapter. There is not a single word in that chapter about a woman feeling pleasure too.
And that doesn't sound like it sounds like it's all related to it's a woman's responsibility for everything.
Yes.
So that he doesn't sin. So
Right.
that he doesn't look at anyone else or anything else. So he basically is a passive player in this of being served and taken care of. Like,
yes, exactly. And so I read this book, and I'm sharing it. My daughter worked with me on the blog. I have another friend who was working with me on the blog, and I'm FaceTiming them, and I'm reading them sentences and paragraphs, and we're all just freaking out. And over the next few months, we decided we had to do something. And my daughter is a statistic. She has psychometrics background, so she's in survey design. Joanna Sawatsky, who worked with me, has a master's in epidemiology and is a statistician. And so we thought we were just going to put all our skills together, and we were going to do the largest survey of evangelical women that's ever been done.
wow.
And we were going to find out whether evangelical teachings about sex and marriage hurt or helped women's marital and sexual satisfaction. So we surveyed 20,000 women.
Wow.
Yes. And that's what The Great Sex Rescue is based on.
This book is based on 20,000 women.
And we had a good cohort from Australia too, so thank you. Yes.
Very good. I would have loved to have participated. I didn't know about it, but what I love, you've got statistics, you've got graphs, you've got comparisons. It's actually very objective. Look, if you're watching and you're enjoying it, I can see there's a couple of hearts and a like there. Feel free to make a comment. Have any of you read the books that Sheila's referring to? That and have you heard that thing that it's love versus respect and so on? I mean, obviously we do respect one another and we do want love, but
but they're not gendered. They're not gendered. They shouldn't be gendered.
No, that's right. Wow. Wonderful. Okay, keep going.
So what we did was we took this survey, and first of all, we asked women all about their marital satisfaction. Ton of questions. Like this whole survey had at least 130 questions. So it was very invasive.
Right.
Then we asked all about your sexual satisfaction, and we got up close and personal there. And then we presented a whole bunch of different evangelical teachings. And we said, have you ever been taught this? And did you believe it at two different points in time? And from that, we could compare women who did believe something with women who didn't believe something and see if it has statistical significance on their marital or sexual outcomes. And so we identified like 4 big teachings. There were others, but we talked about 4 big ones in The Great Sex Rescue that really messed up women's sex lives.
Wow.
That we hear all the time in Christian circles.
Wow. I want to get into that. I want to say, so Jan Ross is watching. Good to see you, Jan. That's actually my mum. And I'm quite curious, as we go through this with these, my mum did not become a Christian until she was in her 40s, I think. When I was 16, and I remember her telling me about her 1950s upbringing, where purity was a thing, was a priority, and I know that she waited till she got married to my father, her first husband, and I have a wonderful stepdad and a great, but her naivety, it's almost like the evangelical teaching has sort of a reflection of that 1950s purity and that it's all on the woman kind of thing. So Mum, if you're still there as we go, I'd love to hear a comment about that later on by comparison. So 4 main things, Sheila.
Yeah, there were other ones, but there were 4 that we really focused on. And like, just to give you an example, one of them is this idea that all men struggle with lust. It's every man's battle.
Oh, you mean they don't?
So you hear this a lot. There's a whole book series that's called Every Man's Battle. It's sold about 4 million copies. And the idea is that lust is something that men suffer from, and that they were actually made that way. There's a quote in the book that says, "We find another reason for sexual sin among men. We got there naturally simply by being male."
Hold on. So God made them to lust.
Yes. Or
Whoa.
they're made to be like visual, and that this is a area of weakness for men or whatever. And so this is a
Right.
big
So
thing, that all men struggle with lust.
that's a pretty big criticism of God.
I know. And they even say that in another book, in the same series. They say that men just don't naturally have that Christian view of sex.
Well, hang on. Does anyone, if we're fallen?
Apparently
But
women do, but men don't.
but
And so
God didn't
women can
make
never
us.
understand how much men struggle.
Oh, that sounds like such a victim. Oh, you just don't understand.
Mhm.
Yeah, no. Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yes, and so we measured it. We said, "Well, what happens when women believe this?" And what we found is, like, when women believe that all men struggle with lust, women's libido goes way down, and their
Oh,
orgasm rates go down, and their trust in their husband goes down, even if he is not untrustworthy. So even if there's no signs of porn use, there's no signs of him looking at other women, still their trust in him goes down.
and your respect for them. Well, I'm just
Mhm.
sort of processing what you're saying. I know I have your book and I've read a lot of your blogs, but I'm sort of imagining myself thinking about if I thought my husband Justin was a slave to the desire for sex, what that says about me is that he doesn't really love me. He just needs to use me
Mhm.
to get release, which
Mhm.
kind of makes him a bit more base, a bit more of an
Yes.
animal, like those dirty creatures. Uh, and how can I honor him and respect and look up to him for the great character that he is if I
Mhm.
think he's just base? And how can I trust how he sees me? Does he see me, or does he just see? I won't use it. I was just had some inappropriate phrases come to mind, like
Yes.
skin with a hole in the middle. But we won't. I won't say that because that would be really offensive.
Yes, but that's exactly the point, is what does this mean about men? Because they literally say in the book, and it's interesting, they use the word release as well, just like Emerson Eggerichs did in Love and Release.
Ugh.
It said, or Love and Respect. It says, when you realize how needy he is, you might be upset, but do the right thing, give him release. And then the book says to women, when he quits cold turkey, meaning quitting porn or lust, be like a merciful vial of methadone for him.
So be his porn star.
Yes, so we are his drug so that he doesn't go look at porn, which is so dehumanizing.
So did they say anything about intimacy and
No,
friendship and building relationship and
no,
becoming one flesh?
no,
Uh,
not at all.
and-
And again, nothing about her pleasure, nothing about the fact that she matters too. It really is all about, you need to have sex so that he doesn't watch porn. And he needs to use you. In fact, he needs to transfer his sexual energy from all of the women around him onto you so that he doesn't sin. And so you become the receptacle for him. And what he does in order to avoid lust is he has to bounce his eyes and avoid looking at every woman, so that all of his sexual energy is put on you. And that still objectifies women. When you bounce your eyes so you don't look at a woman, you're still treating her like a sex object. And Jesus never refused to look at women. Jesus chose to truly see women.
He did. He's that woman at the well.
Mhm.
Like the Pharisees who
Mhm.
refused to look at women, the Pharisees were the ones who just um, were they would have things across their eyes. They would just not be able to even talk to a woman,
Yeah.
and yet it's almost so there's a sort of a parallel between Pharisees and this teaching of who, and yet Jesus cared. He didn't shy away from her sex life, because he said, you've been married 5 times and you're shacked up with the latest one.
Yeah.
But he cared. He saw her and he cared.
Yep. And he saw her as a whole person, and that's the big difference. And so often in evangelical books and in evangelical culture, women are treated not like whole people, but as objects to use for men. And that kills a woman's libido, because then sex is seen as something very ugly. It's not about intimacy. And it reduces sex merely to release again. And that's not the way the Bible talks about sex. Now, if you look biblically, sex is something which is intimate. We hear in Genesis, Adam knew his wife Eve and they conceived a son. And it's easy to laugh at that, like think God's just is afraid of using the real word. But that word, to know, it's this longing for deep intimacy. Like sex is a knowing of each other. We know from Song of Solomon that sex is pleasurable for both. So it isn't just about his release. It's about both of you together. And then in 1 Corinthians 7, sex is totally mutual. It's not one-sided. And so biblically, sex is something which is supposed to be mutual, intimate, and pleasurable for both. And so often our books and resources, instead of treating it that way as a holistic thing, have reduced it to something which is just a male need, which women provide. And it's very wrong.
It's really, really wrong. And it's insulting to men.
It is. It is. We've recently done another survey, this time of men, and that's out in our new book, The Good Guy's Guide to Great Sex, which comes out next month. But we actually measured the lust question, and we found that while 75% of men do say they struggle with lust, so it's not 100%, it's only 75%. But when you break it down, almost half of those men do not watch porn and do not show any signs of lusting in a whole bunch of different scenarios that we gave them. And they don't have constant thoughts of women running through their heads. So we think what's going on is that we have equated noticing that a woman is beautiful with lust. And so a lot of men are walking around thinking they're lusting when they simply are noticing someone's beautiful. And that's not lust.
That's right. I saw your blog on that and I shared it. And I actually sent it to the gentleman who, he and his wife look after the young adults at my church, Kingdom Culture Church. And he's brilliant. He's 29. He's just the most amazing leader. And I sent it to him and I said, this is going to really set some of your young men free. And he was thrilled because it doesn't occur to them. If you're told what, you feel these feelings or you notice something and you think it's lust, well, it's not so much. It's like, I appreciate beauty. Like, I have a photography background. I appreciate beauty. I appreciate symmetry. I appreciate shapes. It doesn't mean I want to go to bed with someone. And I think that's where the words that we use for love, we have one word for love, and it covers brotherly love. It covers, the marriage, all the different kinds of love. So what we might feel is an enjoyment of a brotherly person, but think to ourselves, oh my goodness, I'm lusting, and the other way around.
Yeah. And so it causes a lot of shame where there doesn't need to be shame. Lust is a deliberate action. So it's looking at someone, Jesus says, with a deliberate mindset. So intending to lust. So noticing someone, seeing someone, none of that is lust.
Enjoying the beauty of how they are.
Yeah.
But that's so freeing, Sheila. It is so freeing. Yeah. Wow. If you're watching, give us a like or feel free to share a comment and maybe tag someone so that they can join in and listen to the conversation. Remember to share it afterwards. And also, if you're watching on YouTube, we'd love you to subscribe to the channel. And I would love you to subscribe to Sheila's website. And she's also got a terrific Facebook group, page. So would this be a good time? We'll keep going with those 4 things, but I want to make sure that I share with people where they can go to find out more. So I'm going to bring up this is Love, Honor, and Vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
So to lovehonorandvacuum.com. This is a fabulous source. You can get the book. You can sign up for her rubric, which we are going to talk about, which is the survey results, which is great. And also we've got, so the Great Sex Rescue, greatsexrescue.com. So you can visit there and order the book and find out more. But her Facebook page has got, and your blog, here we go. There's your blog, which also appears on your Facebook page when you do one. These are really, really terrific articles that are so helpful. She addresses the hierarchy, which we talked about last week with John Zenz, because he's written a book called What's with Paul and Women, and we just basically talked about interpretations for there. So my goal is not to have people angry at the church and resentful of the dilemma, but I am aware that we can feel so, where's my mouse? I can't see it. I've got things going on. We can feel so bound up by people's opinions of even with what girls wear, you know, in church, and what's appropriate and what isn't, that we are losing our young people because they're not getting real answers. And this is what I love about Sheila's work, is it provides some real answers. So let's keep going with those 4 areas that you were talking about.
Yeah, so we did lust and we did the have sex so he doesn't watch porn. And the biggest one, though, is that a wife is obligated to give her husband sex when he wants it.
Hang on. Isn't that just in those other religions where women don't have a voice or anything? Yeah. Isn't that that's those other ones? That's not 20th century Christianity, is it?
Well, 43% of women reported being taught that before they were married, and 39% believed it before they were married. And it's very in our evangelical bestsellers. So I created a rubric of healthy teaching, a 12-point rubric, markers of healthy sexuality teaching. And the one that our book scored the lowest on was this obligation sex message.
Yeah. And look, let's just clarify too, because I mean, I never heard that you had to have obligation sex. There's a difference between, you may not really feel like it, but you know, you do it as a loving gift to be unselfish and to minister to your husband. There are times that it's not like, you know, it's all about you, that there are times when, you know, you will, when you don't feel like it, in the same way that you don't feel like getting up and making someone a cup of tea, but you just want to love them and care for them. This is not that, because there's nothing wrong with that. It is about, you have no choice, isn't it?
Yeah, it's, you have no choice. And it's just, what it does is it centers sex around the husband rather than around both of you. And it makes you invisible, because if sex is supposed to be something which is intimate, it means it's a deep knowing of 2 people. And you can't know each other if one person's needs don't matter. And if you're saying that she's obligated to give him sex, then you're saying her needs don't matter. And for instance, Kevin Lehman in his book Sheet Music talks about how if you're not feeling well, or if your periods are really heavy, or if you're postpartum, you can give your husband a hand job instead. You know?
Okay. Sorry, that wasn't yeah. I just, how about you just bring her a cup of tea instead?
Yes, exactly. But this is a big theme in our books. And in fact, what we did, we looked at the top 10 marriage books and 6 iconic sex books in the Christian world. And there was one word that was missing from all of them.
And what was that?
Consent. We just don't talk about it. And a lot of books actually have stories of marital rape and don't talk about that as something bad. In that, The Act of Marriage by Tim LaHaye, he tells the story of Aunt Matilda. So this young woman is getting married, and her Aunt Matilda comes to her and tells her that marriage is just legalized rape, and sex was terrible. And Tim LaHaye is saying how terrible it is that this aunt is wrecking sex for her niece. But he explains that the aunt was held down kicking and screaming on her wedding night as her husband raped her. And that this continued over the next, few decades. And now Aunt Matilda and her equally unhappy husband, so he calls the rapist equally unhappy as the rape victim, have never been able to experience great sex.
Okay, this is I should have put a trigger warning on this because I think I'm the one who's getting triggered. So this reminds me of that Bible, you know how the Old Testament gets criticized because there's that verse about, if someone is raped, they're to be made to marry the rapist, and we don't know what the circumstances are around that. I'm not going into that theology, but we would think that would never happen here. And I'm horrified that even passed an editor's desk to go to print.
Oh, and it did. It's gone through 4 reprints, like four new editions, and nobody took that out.
I'm going to bring my husband. Well, my husband will not. He doesn't like going on the Zooms or anything. But I've talked to him about these things, and he said to me, I would never want, like, even if he wasn't married to me, but even as a non-Christian, the thought of someone not wanting to have sex with me, I wouldn't like. It was just incomprehensible to him that you would consider doing it with someone who just didn't want to with you. They're not attracted to you. They're not into it. He said, Where is the pleasure in that? Because I'll tell a bedroom secret here. And it wasn't always like this because I had a few prudish hang-ups at the start. But my husband makes me a priority. And all of us, when sex is about the woman's pleasure, he's happy anyway. My pleasure is his.
Yep.
And he delights in that. For him, it actually makes him feel incredibly manly and empowered as a man. And I adore him. I mean, this is a man who offered to go to prison instead of me. He said to my lawyers, because if you don't know the story, you can visit it. But I spent 8 months incarcerated. And when we were talking to our lawyers, my husband said, can I go instead of her? And I said to him, oh, honey, you're way too pretty. You can, and he couldn't. But that was his priority. That's the man that I married. I thought other men were like that.
And actually, a lot of them are not, because what we found is that in the evangelical world, we have a 47-point orgasm gap. And what I mean by that is that 95% of men almost always reach orgasm during a sexual encounter, but only 48% of women do.
Wow.
So there's a lot of sex, which is not very good for her, that is going on. And yet over and over again, women are told you need to have sex with him, and his needs are prioritized.
That's right.
And with this obligation sex message, we see the results. And this was something that we were very interested to find out. Is one of our big research questions is, why do evangelical women suffer from sexual pain at twice the rate of the general population?
Wait, hold on. Sorry, what was that statistic?
Yeah, so evangelical women suffer from sexual pain. There's a sexual pain disorder called vaginismus, which is when the muscles of the vaginal wall contract and become really tight, which makes penetration super painful, if not impossible. And it's been known for like 50 years in the gynecological literature that evangelical women suffer from this at twice the rate of the general population.
Wow.
So we wanted to find out, like, why? Like, what is it specifically about us? And so we looked at all these different things. And one of the biggest reasons is the obligation sex message. Okay, when women believe that, your chance of experiencing vaginismus increases to almost the same statistical effect as if you had been abused.
Well, it kind of is a form of abuse.
Exactly. That's exactly it, because our bodies literally interpret the obligation sex message as trauma.
Wow.
And yet this is what our resources and our pastors are teaching. They say, do not deprive him. You're not allowed to deprive him. And that's a complete misuse of 1 Corinthians 7. And it's coercing women, and it isn't right, because if you're having one-sided intercourse, she's already being deprived. That verse doesn't even apply. and if sex is supposed to be something which is mutual, intimate, and pleasurable for both, then that verse can never be used to tell a woman that she has to put up with one-sided intercourse.
And these poor men who just, they're not connecting with their wives are not happy, or they're feeling, they would be feeling like failures as lovers.
Mm-hmm.
And they need help, and they think that seeing pornography will give them some tips, but on how to love her more, and have it just doesn't, because it's not about the technique. It is about that intimacy. And it makes you wonder that when we have a patriarchy of church where it's only the men who are able to, and fortunately my church background is not like that, but when it's about the patriarchy, they're the only ones preaching and teaching, the men. Mm-hmm. Whose perspective are you going to get? Mm-hmm. That's all you're going to get. That's crazy.
Yeah. And honestly, like
one of
the big things we're trying to show in our book is that it isn't necessarily men's fault in a lot of these cases. No. Like, if she's having terrible sex, if she can't reach orgasm, if she's got sexual pain, we did all these focus groups with so many women after we did our surveys, and over again, a lot of women told us it was because of my husband that I got better. Like, my husband never wanted me to believe all this stuff, but I grew up reading the books, because women are the ones who read the books. It's not guys, okay? Women are the ones who read all these books that hurt us.
We drag them to the marriage seminars.
What we're reading.
We drag them to the marriage seminars. I think my husband would rather sit at home and put pins in his eyes than come along. He's like, oh, do I have to? And I'm like, oh. And now I'm a bit smarter these days. Yeah. Oh, goodness me.
Yeah. So many women told us, that it was my husband's patience, and it was my husband telling me, I never want you to do anything you don't want to do. And my husband giving me permission to say no, which finally let my body start to respond. So when they finally sat down and talked to their husband, because we talked to women who hadn't explained what they were thinking or feeling for like 3 years, 5 years, even 20 years. And when they finally sat down and talked to their husbands, it changed everything. And their husbands gave them that permission to say no and to not do anything. And that's when the libido returned and the ability to respond returned.
I want to clarify what you just said there, because I think we can say it. It's not that the husbands gave them permission to say no, but they gave themselves, their husbands persuaded them that they can give themselves.
Yes, that's exactly it. You're right. That's a better way of wording it.
No.
Because these
men
felt like they could.
These men, these beautiful, lovely, these men who love God and they love us, they want us to have pleasure with them. They don't want to feel inadequate. They don't want to feel like, what am I doing wrong? She hates my touch. She recoils from my touch. Mm-hmm. And being able to, a lot of women just never initiate sex. Mm-hmm. That it is okay to look at your husband who's been digging in the garden and he's all sweaty. He's got some soil up his eyes. Oh, sorry, that was my memory. It's okay to tell him that, oh, your muscles are just gorgeous. That there's a little cleft in the collar that is just, it's covered by a shirt, but there's the little that I just love. And I learned, here's one thing that I did, because I nearly lost my marriage very early on, purely because we were so busy. It wasn't about sex. It was, we were so busy getting on with life, we neglected each other. And then I trained myself that whenever I thought of my husband, I would think of his good qualities. Uh-huh. And I would think of that little cleft, and I would think of his kindness and different things, instead of how he left his boots in the wrong spot. So we've got to train our minds as well in that, and give him some credit, because they want our pleasure too. They want to be good lovers and husbands. They just need that help and support and that confidence, sexual confidence, from us.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say most men definitely do. Now, obviously, if you're married to someone who doesn't, if you're married to someone who does believe the obligation sex
Yeah,
message,
true.
and about 29% of men do, according to our men's survey.
Really?
Yeah. So that's a problem, and so if you are in that sort of situation, have some conversations with him. Just remember that you do not need to agree to be treated like an object.
Mm.
And it's okay to say to your husband, I want to make love to you. I want to have a passionate sex life with you, but I am no longer willing to be used. And so when you're ready to have sex, which involves me, I am here for you, but I am no longer willing to just be used. That's okay to do because you do not have to agree to be treated like an object. So I just want to say that if you're in a marriage where your husband honestly doesn't care about you, where he's using porn and he just wants to act out on you, or where he's not interested in your pleasure, then that is something that it's okay to say, this isn't good. We're not going to keep doing this until we get this sorted out.
And your book has got some really good advice. So you see, you've got different types of marriages that you're addressing. You've got the ones where they want it to be better, but you've also got the ones where they believe that teaching because for whatever reason, whatever hang-ups, whatever trauma they've been through, they feel like they need, or woman hating, maybe mummy walked out on them or whatever. They've got that need to control the other party. But in your book, you have got some suggestions and strategies to help, and we're not just talking sex positions and things like that.
No.
And, even as you were talking, perhaps not the extreme end, but even for women who lack sexual confidence to initiate, you could have do a game where you're the one in charge.
Yeah.
And you do things, and he's, because imagine his pleasure if you're the one, saying it's all the way that you want it for that interlude. For some people that would be just such a breakthrough moment, perhaps not for the ones where the husbands are too insecure to give up any kind of control.
Right.
Which was also, we talked last week about patriarchy. It was about idolatry and the excuse for selfishness, that they're putting themselves in the place of God. So we're supposed to obey God, but you've got to obey me. Well, that's idolatry. So anyway, wonderful stuff. Let's keep going. Let's that's what shall we do? Shall we go to the root? Have you got some more to say about that, or shall we go to the rubric?
We can go to the rubric, sure.
Let's do that. So a rubric is, or just let them know what a rubric actually is, because sometimes it's only people who've in certain circles have heard that phrase.
Right. So what we did was we wanted an objective way that we could rate and score the books that we were looking at. So like I said, we took the top 10 selling marriage books, 6 iconic sex books, and then we looked at the top selling secular marriage book as a control book. And that's John Gottman's 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, which incidentally is a wonderful book. But anyway, when we took the 10 marriage books, 3 of them did not talk about sex, so we excluded them from our study. So we had 13 books overall, plus John Gottman's book, and we created 12 questions that summarized great sex after we had looked at our survey and figured out what really went into good sex. Plus we looked at all kinds of journal articles and what's out there in the literature. So we summarized it in 12 things. And some of those are things like, does the book acknowledge that the blame for the husband's affair or porn use lies at the foot of the husband, or does it at least in part blame the wife? We had questions about, does the book mention that sex is more than just physical, but it's also intimate? Does the book pay attention to both people's appearance, or does it only talk about the wife's appearance, the importance of keeping up her appearance? Does it talk about how women can have the higher libido? Does it talk about how women are allowed to say no? Like all of these sorts of things. So we had 12 markers of healthy sexuality, and then we showed what it would look like from a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. So you could score either 0 to 4 on that rubric, and then we scored all of the books.
Now, what I'm showing is one page, one screenshot I lifted from the rubric. There's a whole lot more to it, but this is, and then I created my own list of your top books.
Mm-hmm.
And I've read some of them. And in fact, I was put on to this is a good one. And I started reading it. It was the Boundaries in Marriage book.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking to myself, there are some evangelical leaders who would hate this book
Mm-hmm.
because it is so much about boundaries, and because they don't want women to have boundaries
Mm-hmm.
for their husbands.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So you can download this rubric. There is a link
Yep.
on how you can download it.
Yes. So I'm going. Let's go to the link now. Is it in?
If you go to books at the top,
Yep.
if you go to books and then go to Great Sex Rescue, and then it's the Healthy Sex Teachings rubric right there.
Okay, great.
And there
people
you
can
just put your
subscribe
email
there
address
somewhere,
in, and I'll get it all to you. So there's that's where you can find that.
So I'm going to put this in the comments.
Okay.
So that people can. There we go. There it is there.
But there is a wide range of scores, and this is something I really want people to understand, because I think there's this misperception that all Christian books say the same thing, and they really don't. And we need to have a lot more discernment, because, for instance, a book like Love and Respect literally scored 0 out of 48 on our rubric.
Wait,
it could
oh
not
my
have been
goodness.
worse.
Yeah, well, let's have a look at that again. That's up the top here. So red is bad, and his needs, her needs is in red. Interesting.
Yeah.
Boundaries in Marriage is great. That's good. Now, I'm going to make this a little bit easier so people can read it like this. But what I did is I took this list and I put it in order of approval from your team.
Mm-hmm.
And let me see if I've got it here. So I just did a simple marriage book chart, green, yellow, red. So you had Tied Equal, 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, and The Gift of Sex. So they tied.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Boundaries in Marriage, that's the one that I'm reading at the moment here. That was really, really good. And I'm trying to get my husband to read it too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's because he doesn't, well, he's just not much of a reader. And I think he feels like it's going to be another one of those, ones that tell him everything's his fault. Actually, that's often the case in marriage seminars, that she's the one with the hang-ups, but if you would only do the dishes, you'd get more sex, which is more manipulation.
Thing. Yes.
It's a more manipulation on these poor fellas. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to clarify too, there's one of my favorite authors is at the bottom of your list.
Okay.
But she's not my favorite because of her marriage book. She's my favorite because of her raising children book.
Mm-hmm.
So I love Stormy O'Martian's The Power of a Praying Parent. Loved it. It was very effective. I did find that her marriage book, I don't know how your rubric went into it, but for me, because I'm a professional, I've been dealing with investments and finance, and, my husband and I are together in the breadwinning kind of thing. I did find it was a little bit, you can't cater for everybody, but it was a bit stereotypical in the prayers that you pray for your husband are about, because he has this, it was a little bit traditional, and my husband didn't fit into those things. I could pick some of them.
Yes.
So, I can see why she's here, but I also want to let people know that it's those principles just there, because, the heart's in the right place. And
and we only looked at how the books talked about sex, so we didn't rate the books overall. So
she didn't talk much about it at all.
Yeah, she didn't. But when she did talk about it, she didn't talk about it well. Sacred Marriage by Gary Thomas actually talked about sex quite well, but I don't think he talked about marriage particularly well. So even though that's scored in the green for sex, it's not a book I would recommend. So
good. The meaning, and these ones are just neutral, so they either didn't cover it or just didn't cover it well. Right. Wow, that's you must you're one of the few people that actually names books and authors and ministry and so on. One of the big eye openers for me last year, and at the end of the year, I listened to the podcast, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill, and I was horrified at some of the things that were accepted as normal in the way women were made subservient, and the rudeness, the expectation, and also the burden on the husbands that he was somehow weak and unmanly if his wife worked. And, if your wife is a medical professional, a professor, or, or anything, but any job is important. But imagine if someone's done 10 years of university and they're changing lives, and someone who's done a bit of theology says, well, she needs to be at home and give all that up. That's a crime. I mean,
and this is a problem that is quite prevalent in evangelicalism, and especially in sex books, is that it presents everything as gendered. Men are like this, women are like this, men are supposed to do this, women are supposed to do this. And it forgets that God made us all as human beings first, and we're all different. And this gendered stereotypes is not helpful, especially when it comes to sex. Like, even the idea that men always have the higher sex drive, that's not true.
No, it's not.
We found 58% of marriages, he has the higher sex drive, but in 23%, it's roughly equal. And in 19%, she does. But what does it do to those 19% of women when they read these books that always talk about how much he wants you and how you need to provide, when she's like, I just want him to want me a little bit, And so we need to stop talking in gendered terms and assume that it's always men that are visual and women aren't visual, and women just want emotional stuff, and that's what they get out of sex, and men want physical stuff. Well, actually, we each should want everything. We each should want the physical and the emotional and the spiritual, like the whole package is what we should want.
Right. And if he's better, like if our work has ebbed and flowed, and so if he has more time at home, or he might work from home, and he likes to keep things tidy, and you're a bit more casual, there's nothing effeminate about a man using the time that he has to organize the house and have things done. If he loves cooking, let him. Just let him. If she's better at maths and balancing the books and being methodical, then let her. You go with the talents that you have. And this thing with the giftings is that, and this was from, and my husband he's a quiet achiever. He doesn't say much. And there was one fellow who had a go at us one day, and he said, I can see who wears the pants in your family. Because I'm a bit more out there and talking and stuff. And of course I had to say nothing, because that would have proved his point. And my husband, who doesn't normally bother, because he doesn't have to prove anything, he said to this guy, listen, if I know my wife has got gifts and callings, he said, if I try and stop that or squash that because of my insecurities, he said, that's weak. And he said, if I try and stop her from doing what God's called her to do, I've got to answer to God for that. And he said, my role as a husband and father is to provide an environment where the members of my family can fulfill what God has called them to do, so they can grow. And I just went, who is this? He suddenly looked a whole lot handsomer. And I can tell you, he was deeply loved. That just raised my regard for him incredibly. So they're missing out.
Absolutely. And that's something that we found too in our survey is, couples who live according to traditional gender rules, that doesn't actually hurt. Okay. So it doesn't hurt, doesn't help, it's neutral, unless you think that you're supposed to. And as soon as you think that you're supposed to live by gender rules, then if you do, it turns out badly.
Wow.
And so
That's
it's
so
it's
powerful.
not what you do. The main thing is, are we doing it? Are we doing things this way because we feel like this is who we are and this is who God made us to be? Or are we doing it because we feel like we have to? And as soon as you feel like you have to, things go badly. And I think what I'm hoping from the Great Sex Rescue is that we teach Christians to think differently about this, because we're so used to asking the question, well, what do I believe Scripture tells me to do? And yet Jesus told us that a good tree can't bear bad fruit and a bad tree can't bear good fruit. So if we start looking at data and we start saying, you know what? If you live that way, it turns out badly, then that should be a clue to us that the way that we're interpreting Scripture is off, because Jesus doesn't cause us emotional harm.
Oh, Jesus doesn't cause us emotional harm. If it works for you, great. But if it doesn't, yeah, most people would rather be right than get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But what if what we think is right isn't quite right?
Yeah.
If
Yeah.
we're going to be open to that, it opens up a whole new world and a fresh relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's truth. And so you don't need to be afraid of looking at data. And so here's what 20,000 women say. And it really points a picture of a much healthier sex life, which is focused on freedom and and on things on the things that Jesus talked about, rather than entitlement and obligation.
Hang on. I love that. Say it again. That our focus on freedom rather than entitlement.
Freedom rather than entitlement and obligation. Yeah.
That's where the joy of the Lord lies.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That our show is called Free Indeed. Prison to Promise to be free indeed. And even though all of these books, I did actually show, I thought I was looking at it. I did show this, didn't I? Before the list at some point. Oh, good. So, but you know what I want to put to the top of that list, of course, is is this one, The Great Sex Rescue. So if you're watching, please share, add. Okay, if you want to make a comment, please pop it in. I'm going to finish up in a minute. And we have got Sheila's 2 websites. So she's got the 2 websites, which is Love, Honor and Vacuum, and the Sheila Wray Gregoire.
If you go to lovehonorandvacuum.com, you'll find everything. So
right. And you're on Facebook. So
yes.
if you are watching on Facebook, go just type in to Love, Honor and Vacuum, and Sheila will be there. And at some point, I'm sure that you'll share this link to there.
Yes.
So they can watch it. And oh my goodness, it's just been so lovely. We're not men bashing. We're not preacher bashing. It's just that it's good to have. We love God. If Jesus said we can be free indeed, I want the indeed.
Yes.
And I want it in the most important relationship in my life, apart from mine with God, is with my husband. And I want that. And you help bring that. So thank you, Sheila Gregoire. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks. It's been great to be here.
Thank you, everyone.